While perusing today's news about Ukraine, all I could think about was keen eye for the obvious and I told you so. This is kind of an odd way to combine headlines, but okay, both are important stories. As you know, there's been another barrage of attacks in Ukrainian east, namely around the familiar locations such as Kupiansk, Avdiivka, Bakhmut, etc. So there's now been a decision to evacuate children from the Kupiansk area. Good decision. I'm a little surprised they didn't do it sooner. In general, as much of the civilian population that they can get out of there, the better, and do it proactively. And here's something interesting. So there's peace talks in Malta, trying to basically determine how to end this whole thing. But Russia is not invited. And so Russia is criticizing the organizing of the peace talks without inviting them. And that is like an ultimate act of hypocrisy, because look at all of the meetings Russia has had with its allies discussing Ukraine without Ukraine being present. So I'm not sure what they're complaining about. They do this all the time. This is from BBC. So Zelensky says it is likely that the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant was targeted on purpose, that it wasn't just an air raid. And all I can say is, duh. I mean, why is that even something that needs to be pointed out? We already know. Winter is coming, Jon Snow. And the Russian government pretty much already stated, followed closely by the Russian pundits, that if they can't defeat Ukrainians in the conflict, they're going to freeze them, starve them, etc. Moreover, they keep emphasizing that Ukrainians deserve this because they resisted, because they refused to surrender, because they refused to yield their country to the Russians without, saying a word. So, yeah, there's no surprise at all that nuclear power plants are being targeted, and likely other parts of infrastructure will be targeted in the future. So time to decide and plan where to put those Patriot air defense systems, because they're going to be needed. Again, this is something that has been known for a long time. Russia's decision to unleash hundreds of murderers, rapists, and thieves, some of whom were serving a life sentence, some of whom were serial criminals, unleash all of that horror onto Ukraine. So yes, their prison population had plummeted, but many times before, some of the stories that I showed you is, so either they go to Ukraine, they get killed, great. Ukraine is basically doing Russia a favor by executing their prisoners without Russia having to lift a finger. And Russian-owned military leaders basically said that they were using these people as cannon fodder. So the fact that these guys haven't revolted yet is rather surprising, because they know what happens at the Ukrainian front. They know. They can't be that stupid. And of course, the other side of it is the damage to Russian population themselves, because, as we now know, some of these guys survive and come home, but they're still criminals. And they have just had a stint where they were allowed to do whatever the heck they wanted indiscriminately. And so they come home and they are not controllable. Moreover, now they have the "I'm a hero" defense. And when some of them go right back to stealing, raping, and killing, they get either no sentence at all for their services to the country, or a very light sentence. So ultimately, this is a bad decision for Russia, and Russian government doesn't seem to care. Again, this is kind of obvious. This has been a conversation actually going all the way back to the invasion of Crimea, because if you recall, some of Ukraine's staunchest allies were speaking up even back then. Some of Ukraine's closest neighbors, the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, um, everybody who is up close and personal and has the front row seat to what is going on has been saying this. You know, we cannot let Ukraine fall because then we end up with Russia on our doorstep. And who wants that? And again, these are the countries that have historic context. These are the countries that have been invaded by Russia when it was the Russian Empire or when it was the Soviet Union wielding the power of all the previously occupied territories against more. So why the world community is not paying attention, I don't know. And then there is this. So there's been polls among the Russian citizens, and this is again something that I have been saying for a long time, and now there's data to prove this. So Euronews and Voice of America both conducted a series of questions asking people of Russia what they think about the war. And while a lot of them, 80% of them, expressed concern about the economic effects of the sanctions, most of them still support the war, and they do not blame their government. Now, I have seen some of the questionnaires. They're in Russian, unfortunately, so you can't read them. But I'm not joking. I wish I was. So majority of people thinks that either Ukraine or NATO or the US started this war, neither of which is true. A tiny percentage says that Russian government is to blame for the war. And some of them chose this very interesting option, saying, I'm not really sure whose fault it is, but it's not us. So, as I've said many, many times before, don't give me the myth of the good Russians. The good Russians are the ones who defected to Ukraine and are now fighting on the side of Ukraine. The good Russians are the ones aiding with the acts of sabotage within Russia. Unfortunately, that is a very tiny minority. All you have to do is go to Russian social media sites and forums and look at the fun and games there whenever a Ukrainian school gets hit, whenever a Ukrainian hospital gets hit. You should see the gleeful, rejoicing comments by those good Russians who have nothing to do with the actions of their government, celebrating the loss of Ukrainian lives, including Ukrainian women and children. So these numbers from Euronews and Voice of America just prove the point.